Trump is going to go ahead and go on ahead with the Space Force idea. So I've got opinions on it. You've got opinions on it. Is it a good idea? Is it a bad idea? Is it even necessary? But two things that are absolutely written in stone are this. One, it's going to be very difficult to accomplish. And two, they're saying it's only going to be $13 billion of additive cost. Somehow I doubt that. We need to talk about this. Behind closed doors, I'm a fool for your love. Hey, what's up? Welcome to my channel. Good morning, good evening, good night, whatever it is, wherever you are. The Space Force, people have stopped talking about it quite a bit, and it looks like Trump is going to plow ahead with it, and if he is going to plow ahead with it, it is something that we probably should discuss. This is from NPR. I had started this story earlier today, but there was an update, so I deleted all the footage I had. Waited for the update, and I am now refilming it. That way you guys have the most current information. So this has been a very long story to cover because of that update, but well worth it. I want to make sure that we discuss this, and we discuss this with the proper information. So Trump pushes ahead with Space Force despite hurdles. More than just hurdles. They're pretty much mountains. There was the update at 5:32. I'd actually started this quite earlier today, but you know that's the way it goes. Trump pushed forward Tuesday with his plan to launch a Space Force as a new branch of the military. But it would first be under the umbrella of the Air Force, and it requires approval of Congress, which is far from certain. This represents at least a temporary shift. Trump had stated that he wanted a Space Force that is a separate but equal from the Air Force, which I totally agree. So the branches of the military are separate but equal. Each one has a very kind of specific role that they play. The Marine Corps is designed more as a expeditionary force. They are designed to take land. Yes, they can hold land, but their training is more of taking land. They are an expeditionary force. The Army, they can also take land as well, but they are more designed to hold land and fortify it. The Air Force is obviously designed mainly as information gathering and air support, air superiority. The Navy is designed as blockades, obviously also support, air support, and whatnot as well. So they're all interchangeable in a way, but they all do kind of serve a general purpose, and they're specialized towards that purpose, which is a good way to have it. You basically would have, if you were in the old days, you'd have an army of soldiers that you had. Some were specialized, but they were all pretty good at everything, but you had some that were specialized in this one thing that you could send them off to do, and they're better than everybody else at this, which is an advantage. So, President Trump, America must be fully equipped to defend our vital interests. Our adversaries are training forces and developing technology to undermine our security in space, Trump said in the Oval Office as he signed a directive calling on the Pentagon to draft legislation. And he wouldn't be far from the truth. I mean, 50 years ago, would you have thought that we would have to have a branch of the government that's designed to defend us against cyber attacks, cyber security? 50 years ago, I wouldn't have even fathomed it. So here we are talking about Space Force. Well, in 50 years, are we going to look back on it and think, well, yeah, Space Force, that's something that's just everywhere. I mean, why wouldn't we have had it? Who knows? As technology grows and we get into space, I guarantee you we're going to have space battles, so maybe we should jump on this bandwagon early and get a head start. A plan for the Space Force was announced by Trump last June. He wanted to be a sixth branch of the armed forces to ensure American dominance in space. And yes, it should be a sixth branch. If they do make the Space Force, it should absolutely be its own branch because it's a very specialized thing. Space warfare, if we get to that point, if and when, I guess, we get to that point, is going to be a very specialized thing. You're going to want people that are specially trained in that. So a sixth branch, if they do make it, makes absolute sense. Critics have suggested that it could further complicate military bureaucracy at great cost, which absolutely would. You're going to have a whole new branch of military with these extra special circumstances of having a space force and all the nuances and things that that's going to contain. Yes, it's going to cause bureaucracy, it's going to cause cost. And anybody that tells you the cost is going to be that $13 billion additive only cost that they are saying it's going to cost is lying to you. And here is why. They don't know. It is a brand new thing. It would be like me asking you, how much gas does it take to drive from New York to Los Angeles? I don't know. There are too many factors. The weather, how you drive, how fast you drive. Do you accelerate fast? Are you driving behind pickup trucks, which are breaking up the turbulence of the air and creating a vacuum, and thereby you're using less gas? What's the quality of the gas that you're getting? Is the wind at your nose or is the wind at your back? There are too many factors involved. You can't possibly. Now you can come up with a guesstimate, but when it comes to things like space, $13 billion additive cost? No, no, no. It's going to cost a lot more than that. Now, given it will be spread out over a long period of time, hopefully, but it's going to cost a lot more. Unless there is something that causes a massive expansion in the number of military personnel and amount of money we spend on space that would justify a new department, I honestly can't see that, said Brian Whedon, a former Air Force officer, now at the nonprofit Secure World Foundation. Well, here is the shift or the event that would make us get into space, and that is this. If any other country gets into space. At some point, some country is going to be the first to send both civilian and military vessels to protect their civilian and governmental interests in space. It's going to happen. Someone is going to get up there. And if it's not us that gets up there first, when someone else gets up there, we're going to be scrambling. Look at the space race when Sputnik went up. Wow. Everything had to get on pause and everything had to be focused to getting into space because, number one, it was an embarrassment, and number two, it was a sign that the Russians were getting up there ahead of us. We didn't want that to happen. It started the space race. All it takes is just one country get up there, bam, we got a space race again. The White House says creating a space force would mitigate threats in space from other nations. Potential adversaries are now advancing their space capabilities and actively developing ways to attack and destroy our use of space in a crisis or conflict, a senior administration official said, as NPR's Scott Horsley reported. Which is absolutely true. Like I said about cybercrime. 50 years ago, you wouldn't have thought that another country would be getting on a computer and attacking our country on the computer through electrical current wires and things, and I mean, that would have baffled your mind. You would have said no. So here we are thinking about space battles, basically, and we're like, I don't know. I mean, I don't see the cost of it. But imagine 50 years ago, if we had slowly started developing infrastructure to defend against cyber attacks today. How much more advanced today would our cybersecurity be? So imagine if we jump on the bandwagon earlier today in the Space Force, which I kind of don't like the name, but Space Force. Imagine how much more advanced than the other countries would be if we started today. What if we'd have started 20 years ago? Wow. Just food for thought. China, followed by Russia, are the main potential U.S. rivals in space, said John Logsdon, professor emeritus at the Space Policy Institute at George Washington University. I think China has developed the capability to attack our forces in order to defend itself, he said. So whether you call that offensive or defensive, they have the ability to wage an attack against U.S. space assets. Which is worrying when you think about it. If they're admitting that they have the capabilities, then we're behind. As envisioned by Trump, the Space Force's Chief of Staff would be a member of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and would be overseen by a civilian Air Force Undersecretary for Space. It would be akin to the structure of the Marine Corps, which is a part of the U.S. Department of the Navy, but with separate representation on the Joint Chiefs. Which is true. The Marine Corps is the Department of the Navy, but it is generally considered its own branch. The Marine Corps was originally designed to help fight against other nations. They were the ones that were the expeditionary force off of the ships, the ones that went out and accomplished things that you couldn't do on the ship. Let's see. The senior administration officials said that if the plan is approved by Congress, the Space Force would eventually fully separate from the Air Force, as Horsley reported. Exact same thing that happened in the Marine Corps, under the Department of the Navy, and then eventually branched off, and it's pretty much its own branch. The force would consolidate command of the military's existing satellite systems into a single command. Those include reconnaissance satellites, GPS, missile warning systems, yes, that sounds good. I like the idea of missile warning systems, and communications platforms, as NPR's Jeff Brumfeld reported last year. Todd Harrison, director of the Aerospace Security Project at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, told Brumfield that the Space Force would not actually involve troops in space. So we're talking drones and things like that, but at some point in the future there's going to be human interaction. At some point in the future, if we get it up into space, unless somehow by some miracle we all become this awesome altruistic society that has become, dare I say it, humanists, and then and we look at all humans as equal and we don't fight each other. Unless that happens, then yeah. And the likelihood that we're going to be altruistic and we're all just going to get along, not very likely. Let's see here. There's no space marines. There's no people flying around with jetpacks, Harrison says in an opinion piece for Breaking Defense. He recently argued that a space force is needed to consolidate authority and responsibility for national security space in a single chain of command. Okay, so basically using drones and using it as a way to communicate and have the chain of command. I forget what they call it. The God view of the battlefield, basically. Air, land, sea, and now space. Everybody communicates with everybody else. It's kind of the same thing that they use today with police forces. You get a doorbell camera, you can register it with the police, and then if something happens, they can access your doorbell camera and they can track movements of people. It's creating one great big communication bubble. The Air Force is currently responsible for many of the U.S. space-related activities. Last September, Air Force Secretary Heather Wilson said in a memo that establishing a Space Force would cost some $13 billion over a 5-year period. Now here we go. The costs here are additive costs. No. $13 billion over a 5-year period, and they're just additive costs. No. I highly doubt that. The cost of getting up there, you're going to have to create infrastructure. I see the cost being quite a bit more. But I could be very wrong. I could absolutely be very wrong. They are not just the movement of other capabilities and consolidate them. To stand up at... hold on. The cost here are additive costs, she told Defense News. They are not just the movement of other capabilities and consolidate them. Consolidation of them, I think is what it's trying to say. Okay. To stand up to a department that's responsible for recruiting and training and planning and programming and budgeting and all of the leadership requirements that a department has. It's a major undertaking. It's a bold idea. It is. It is a bold idea. But to play devil's advocate, a lot of great advances were bold ideas. If the legislation passes, it would be the first time Congress approved a new branch of the military since 1947 when it created the Air Force, which, again, kind of ties into this as well. The Air Force. We didn't have air travel. All of a sudden, we had the bold idea of air travel. We found out, hey, this is pretty beneficial to our troops and pretty beneficial to defending our our assets and our ideas and our lands and things like that. Oh, well, let's make the Air Force. And now we're at this point here, we're thinking about making the Space Force. Very interesting. It's almost as if history is repeating itself. As Horsley reported, administration officials on Tuesday did not clarify the cost of a future force. Of course they didn't. They're not gonna clarify it. Because if they clarified it better, your jaw would probably drop to the ground. Other money would come from consolidating existing space functions. Well, I skipped one. Oh, forgive me. They did say establishing a new headquarters would cost less than $100 million. Maybe for just barely the building and the computers and things like that, if that's what they're talking about. Just the bare bones actual physical headquarters. Sure, I could see that. Other money would come from consolidating existing space functions within the Space Force, Horsley added. The president's budget might also propose additional money to cover the cost of enhanced military space functions. Okay, there you go. The president's budget may also propose additional money to cover the cost of enhanced military space functions. In other words, it's going to cost $100 million to do this, but we do have the ability to pull money from other programs when it needs it. Open-ended. Blank check, basically. While the idea of a Space Force is a crowd pleaser at Trump's rallies, it has been met with skepticism or even ridicule among other audiences. The Washington Post rounded up cartoons from around the country about the idea. Oh, I've seen a couple of them. Some are kind of actually funny. And Netflix has announced that Steve Carell is going to star in a new comedy series about the idea. It's a workplace comedy centered around the people tasked with creating a sixth branch of the armed services, Space Force. This was by Greg Meyer, NPR. They're going to make a comedy on Netflix about it, but I mean, really, when you think about it, they kind of, in the article, when they were talking about the Air Force and how it wasn't a thing, and then they started the Air Force because all of a sudden now we had air travel, we had planes, and it became necessary to say, hey, wait a second, this is something that is going to benefit the military, and if we don't have an Air Force, we're going to fall behind. Isn't that kind of, to play devil's advocate here, isn't that kind of the same position we're in right now with the Space Force? Just saying. I don't know if I'm for it. I don't know if I'm against it. This one I am definitely looking forward to your comments on. Are you for it? Are you against it? And why are you for it? Why are you against it? And then the cost. Do you believe the cost is going to be what they're quoting here, or do you believe it's going to be some sort of an astronomical thing? And then, whether you're for it or against it, do you believe it might be necessary for the future to protect our interests? We're going to get in space as long as nothing else destroys Earth first. But at some point we're going to get in space. We're going to have to, or we're going to die as a species. Because, look, Earth is not going to be here forever. At some point in time, somewhere, somehow, the Earth is going to end. No matter how far away it is, at some point it's going to end. And at that point, we're going to want to be out there on enough planets that if anything happens, the human civilization is still able to exist and thrive. Those are my thoughts. So, let me know what you guys think. I am really interested in reading the comments on this one. And I am out of here. I will see you on the next one. Give a like, give a comment, subscribe. Help me beat that damn YouTube algorithm. Let's make this something great, and let's discuss this. I'm really waiting to read these comments. This is gonna be great. I want to know what you guys think, because really I'm just I can see for and I can see against. I honestly can. So I need some persuasive arguments here. All right, so I will see you guys on the next one. I'm out of here. You guys have a good one.